At some point, you made yourself too easy to reach. You answered every call, responded to every message, showed up for people who never showed up for you, made yourself available at any hour for anyone who decided your time was theirs to take. You were present, consistent, reliable, and generous with the one thing you can never recover once it is gone: your time, your energy, your attention. And what did constant availability produce? Not gratitude, not respect, not deeper connection or stronger relationships, or a reputation as someone of great character and generosity. It produced something else entirely. It produced the quiet assumption in the minds of everyone around you that you would always be there, that your presence required no effort to maintain, that your attention was a resource without limit that could be drawn on at will and never needed to be earned. You became, without ever intending to, background noise in your own life. The Stoics understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives failing to grasp. They understood that what is freely and endlessly available is never truly valued. That scarcity is not a manipulation tactic, but an honest reflection of worth. That a person who is always reachable, always responsive, always present for everyone who wants a piece of them, is a person who has handed their power to the world and called it virtue. It is not virtue. It is the slow erosion of everything that makes you formidable. Disappearing silently is not running away. It is not coldness or arrogance or the performance of mystery for the sake of seeming interesting. It is the deliberate, principled decision to withdraw your energy from everything and everyone that has been spending it without permission. To go quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have decided that your words, your time, your presence, and your attention are reserved for things that have earned them. And winning completely is what happens on the other side of that decision, not in a dramatic moment of triumph that everyone witnesses, but in the slow, compounding accumulation of days spent building something real with energy that used to be scattered across 100 people and situations that were consuming it without producing anything in return. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal words that were never meant for public consumption. Confine yourself to the present. A man is rich in proportion to the number of things he can afford to let alone. Letting alone. That is the discipline this video is about. Not silence as absence, silence as strategy. Not disappearing as defeat. Disappearing as the most powerful move available to someone who has finally understood where their real leverage lies. It lies in your unavailability, in your focus, in the compounding interest of energy redirected from things that drain toward things that build. In becoming the kind of person that people sense has a gravity about them that they cannot quite name but cannot quite ignore. That gravity is not charisma. It is not charm or good looks or social skill. It is the unmistakable quality of someone who knows exactly what they are worth and has stopped accepting anything less than that as the price of their company. If today is the day you finally stop handing your energy to people who never deserved it, comment below, "I am disappearing to win." Stop being available to everyone and start becoming unavailable to the wrong ones. Your phone is always within reach, not because you consciously decided it should be, but because somewhere in the gradual architecture of modern life, constant reachability became the default, and you accepted that default without examining what it was costing you. Every notification responded to within minutes, every request acknowledged before it had time to settle, every person who wanted your attention given access to it on demand, at any hour, regardless of what you were doing or what that interruption was pulling you away from. And you called this responsiveness, you called it being a good friend, a reliable colleague, a caring partner, an available parent. You gave it the names of virtues because the alternative, naming it what it actually was felt uncomfortable. What it actually was a complete absence of boundaries around the most valuable thing you possess. Your attention is the raw material of your entire life. Everything you will ever build, every skill you will ever develop, every relationship you will ever deepen, every goal you will ever achieve is constructed from units of sustained, focused, undivided attention, and you have been giving it away in fragments to whoever showed up and asked for it, leaving the projects and people and purposes that actually matter to you operating on whatever is left over after everyone else has taken their portion. The Stoics did not have smartphones, but they understood the principle that smartphones have made into a crisis. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and built his philosophy from the ground up in conditions of complete powerlessness, understood that the only true freedom available to any human being is the freedom to direct their own attention. He called this the discipline of desire and aversion, the trained capacity to move toward what is genuinely valuable and away from what only appears to be. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." What is in your power is your attention, where you direct it, what you allow access to it, who you grant the privilege of your presence and your focus and your time. Most people treat their attention as a common area, open to everyone, available by default, requiring no special effort or earned trust to access. And then they wonder why their life feels scattered and their goals feel perpetually distant and their energy is perpetually depleted, despite the fact that they are constantly busy. Busy is not the same as productive. Responsive is not the same as connected. Available is not the same as valued. In fact, in many cases, they are the opposite. The person who responds to everything is taken for granted, because their response requires no effort to obtain. The person who is always available is not cherished because their availability is assumed. The person who shows up for everyone equally has diluted their presence to the point where it carries no particular weight with anyone. Now consider the alternative. The person who does not respond immediately. Not because they are playing games, but because they are genuinely occupied with something that matters more than the interruption. The person who is sometimes unreachable because their focus is on something that deserves their full attention. The person whose time you have to actually earn because they have decided that their time is not a commodity available to anyone who wants it, but a resource allocated to things and people that have demonstrated they deserve it. That person carries weight. That person's presence means something because it is not automatic. That person's response, when it comes, is read carefully because the reader knows it was not given carelessly. Their attention, when directed at you, feels like something because you understand it is not directed at everyone. Becoming unavailable to the wrong people is not a rejection of connection, it is the protection of it. The depth of a connection is inversely proportional to how many people have equal access to you. You cannot be profoundly connected to 50 people simultaneously. You can be superficially connected to 50 and profoundly connected to 5. The Stoics would tell you that 5 deep connections built on genuine mutual investment will do more for your life than 50 shallow ones built on your perpetual availability. Start auditing your availability, not with a spreadsheet, but with honest observation across a week. Notice who gets your attention and what they do with it. Notice which interactions leave you energized and which leave you depleted. Notice which conversations produce something and which ones simply consume time. Notice the difference between the people in your life who treat your attention as a privilege and the people who treat it as a given. Then begin adjusting, slowly, without announcement, without the dramatic declaration that you are changing. Simply begin responding more slowly to the people who have never earned your speed. Begin being less available to the situations that have never produced anything worth your investment. Begin redirecting, fraction by fraction, the attention that has been leaking toward things that return nothing, back toward the things that are waiting to be built. The wrong people will notice. They will be confused by the change. Some of them will complain, and that confusion and complaint will tell you everything you needed to know about why you were being so available to them in the first place. They were not benefiting from your presence. They were depending on it. And dependence that was never acknowledged, never reciprocated, never appreciated, is not a relationship worth maintaining at the cost of your own development. Seneca wrote, "It is not that I am brave, it is that I have decided what deserves my courage." Apply the same logic to your availability. It is not that you are unavailable. It is that you have decided what deserves your presence. And most things do not. Go silent and watch who reaches. Those people are your real circle. Withdraw your energy for 30 days, and your entire social landscape will rearrange itself into an honest picture. Stop initiating. Stop following up. Stop being the one who keeps every connection alive through the consistent application of your own effort. Go quiet, not dramatically, not with an announcement or a farewell post or any signal that a change is happening. Simply stop being the engine of every relationship and watch which ones keep moving and which ones stop. What you will discover in that 30 days will be clarifying in a way that nothing else could match, because there is no more honest test of a relationship than withdrawal. Not a conflict, not a crisis, not a conversation about the state of the connection, but simple, quiet, unannounced withdrawal. Nothing reveals the actual investment of another person more accurately than the absence of yours. Some people will reach. Within days, sometimes within hours, they will notice the silence and move toward it. Not because they need something, not because they have a request that requires your input, but because your absence created a gap in their life that they genuinely felt and that they were genuinely motivated to close. Those people are telling you something important. They are telling you that your presence in their life is not assumed. It is appreciated. It is noticed when it is absent. It is something they are willing to extend effort to maintain. Those people are your real circle. Small, probably. Smaller than the number of people in your phone. Smaller than the number of people who will happily spend time with you when you are the one making it easy. But real, genuinely real in a way that the larger, easier, more available network never was. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." The relationships that require you to break your own energy, your own boundaries, your own commitment to building something meaningful in order to maintain them, are not advantageous to you. They are expensive. They cost you things you cannot afford to keep paying. And then there will be the others, the ones who do not reach, the ones whose contact with you was entirely contingent on your initiation and your effort and your willingness to make the connection easy for them. These people are not villains. Most of them are simply people who were comfortable with the dynamic as it was, who benefited from your availability without particularly thinking about what it cost you, and who, in the absence of your effort, simply drifted to whatever else was available and easy. That drift is information, not about their character necessarily, but about the nature of what you had. What you had was not a relationship built on mutual investment. It was a dynamic built on your investment and their participation. And the moment your investment paused, the participation ended, because it was never powered by anything on their side. This information is painful. It is one of the more genuinely painful realizations available to a human being. To look at what you thought was a rich social life and discover that a significant portion of it was a performance powered entirely by your own energy. To understand that many of the connections you valued were valued almost exclusively by you. But the pain of that realization is infinitely more useful than the comfortable illusion that preceded it, because the illusion was costing you. It was consuming energy, time, and emotional bandwidth that could have been directed toward the small circle of people who would have reached, who were always going to reach, who will reach again the next time you go quiet. Epictetus taught, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." You cannot wish people into genuine investment. You cannot perform enough availability to manufacture real reciprocity. What is real reveals itself when you stop performing. And what is not real dissolves the moment the performance pauses. Let it dissolve, cleanly and without ceremony, not with anger or resentment or the bitter satisfaction of having been proven right about people who disappointed you. With the quiet understanding that the dissolving is doing you a service. It is returning to you the energy that was being spent on maintaining connections that were never as real as you needed them to be. Invest that returned energy in the small circle, the ones who reached. Go deeper rather than wider. One conversation of genuine depth is worth more than 100 of comfortable surface. One person who noticed your absence and moved toward it is worth more than 50 who were content to let the silence extend indefinitely. The Stoics valued quality in everything, in thinking, in action, in connection. Quality cannot exist at scale. It is by definition rare and selective, and the product of sustained, focused investment. Build a small circle of extraordinary depth and let the large network of comfortable shallowness handle itself. Your real circle is smaller than you think. It is also more powerful than you know, and it has been waiting for you to redirect toward it the energy you have been spending everywhere else. Use the silence to build what your noise was preventing. Every hour you spent managing other people's access to you was an hour not spent building something of your own. That sentence is worth sitting with, because the accounting is real even if you never ran the numbers. Every conversation that went longer than it needed to, every request you fulfilled out of guilt rather than genuine desire to help, every social obligation you honored while something you were building sat waiting, every time you chose responsiveness over focus, every notification you answered before the thought you were in the middle of had finished forming, all of it was time, real, irreplaceable, non-renewable time. And time, unlike money or energy or even relationships, cannot be recovered once it is spent. You can earn more money. You can restore your energy with sleep and rest and proper care. You can rebuild relationships that have been damaged. But the hour that was spent answering a message that did not need to be answered at that moment is gone permanently. It built nothing. It moved nothing. It produced nothing except the maintenance of a social dynamic that may not have deserved the investment. Seneca understood this with a clarity that his letters make almost painful to read across the distance of 2,000 years. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Reclaim yourself, for you were being robbed. How much time has been stolen from you? Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself, 'Is this the condition that I feared?' Reclaim yourself." Those two words contain an entire philosophy. The self is not a fixed object that simply exists. It is built, maintained, directed, and it can be reclaimed from the 1,000 small surrenders that the noise of constant availability demands. Reclaiming it requires going quiet long enough to hear what you were supposed to be building all along. Because in the silence, things clarify. The projects that have been sitting in the background of your awareness while the foreground was occupied with everyone else's needs, begin to come forward. The skills you always meant to develop but never had the sustained attention to pursue begin to feel possible again. The direction your life was supposed to take before the noise redirected, it begins to make itself legible again in the quiet. This is what the Stoics called returning to philosophy. Not philosophy as an academic exercise, but as a daily practice of examining your own life and asking the questions that the noise prevents. What am I building? What do I want my days to be made of? What will I have produced with my time when I look back at this period of my life? Am I spending my hours or investing them? Spending and investing are not the same activity, even when they look identical from outside. Two people can sit at a desk for the same number of hours. One is spending time maintaining the appearance of productivity while managing the demands of everyone around them. One is investing time in the slow, unglamorous, deeply satisfying work of building something that will compound. From outside, the hours look the same. From inside, the difference is everything. Disappearing silently is what creates the conditions for investment. When you are no longer available to be interrupted, you become available to be focused. When you are no longer managing everyone else's access to you, you can manage the direction of your own development. When the noise drops, the signal that was always there, but always being drowned out, finally becomes audible. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. You have power over your mind, not outside events. The outside events that were stealing your focus will not stop generating themselves just because you have decided to stop responding to them. The notifications will still arrive, the requests will still come, the world will continue its demand for your attention with complete indifference to what you are trying to build. What changes is not the world. What changes is your relationship to it. Your trained, disciplined, stoically informed ability to look at the demand for your attention and make a conscious choice about whether to fulfill it. Not automatically, not reflexively, not out of guilt or social pressure or the fear of being seen as unavailable, but from a place of clear-eyed assessment of what that demand is worth relative to what you are building. Most demands will fail that assessment. Most requests for your attention, when measured honestly against the value of what you are building with that same attention, will turn out to be worth far less than the interruption costs. The response that takes 5 minutes does not cost 5 minutes. It costs the 20 minutes of deep focus required to return to where you were before the interruption. And 20 minutes of deep focus, accumulated across a year of fewer interruptions, is a staggering amount of building. Disappear, get quiet, turn the energy that was feeding the noise toward the thing that deserves it, and build in the silence with the kind of sustained, uninterrupted focus that constant availability made permanently impossible. What you build in the silence will outlast every relationship you maintained by being too available, and when you re-emerge from that silence with something real in your hands, something that you made with the energy you reclaimed from the world that was spending it without your conscious permission, the quality of your presence will be entirely different from the quality it was when you left, because you will be someone who built something, and that changes everything about how you move through the world and how the world receives you. Winning completely means letting them wonder while you work. The most powerful move available to someone who has been underestimated is not a confrontation. It is a disappearance followed by a return. When you are constantly available, constantly visible, constantly updating the world on your status and your thinking and your progress and your struggles, you give away the one ingredient that makes a return possible. Mystery. Not the manufactured mystery of someone trying to seem interesting, but the genuine, earned mystery of someone who went somewhere real and came back with something to show for it. Constant visibility is the enemy of transformation. You cannot become something new in front of the same audience that knows you as something old. Every time you share your process before it is complete, you invite opinions and interference and the subtle but powerful social pressure to remain consistent with the person you were when you started sharing. The audience locks you in place with their expectations and their commentary and their investment in the version of you they already know. Disappearing removes the audience, and without the audience, you are free to become something they have no framework for. You are free to fail privately without the cost of public failure. You are free to experiment and discard and pivot and try again without having to explain every iteration to people who were invested in the previous one. You are free to build at the pace that the building actually requires, rather than the pace that maintaining an audience demands. Epictetus said, "Never say about anything that I have lost it, but that I have returned it." What you are returning when you disappear is the social performance of a self that was never fully real. What you are building in its place is something that does not require performance, because it is actually genuinely, measurably there. And then you return. Not dramatically, not with an announcement designed to recapture the attention of the people who became accustomed to your availability. You return simply by being present again, in the same spaces, among the same people, carrying the thing you built in the silence. And that thing, whatever it is, does the announcing without requiring you to perform it. This is what winning completely looks like from inside, not a trophy, not a moment of public vindication, not the satisfaction of having proven something to someone who doubted you, something quieter and more permanent than any of those things. The deep, settled, unshakable knowledge that you used the time that other people were using to watch and comment and stay comfortable, to build something that is now genuinely yours. The Stoics were deeply suspicious of external validation, not because they were indifferent to how their work landed in the world, but because they understood that a person who builds for validation will stop building the moment the validation is withheld. And validation is always withheld at some point. It is inconsistent by nature. It depends on factors outside your control. The audience that applauds today may be indifferent tomorrow, not because your work has changed, but because their attention has moved. Build for the work itself. Build because the thing you are making matters to you in a way that is independent of how many people are watching or how they respond when they see it. Build with the Stoic understanding that the value of your effort is in the effort itself and in the quality of what it produces, not in the reception that quality receives from people who were not in the room when it was being made. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not indulge in dreams of what you have not, but count the blessings actually present, and think how much you would desire them if they were not yours already. Count the work. Count the hours of focused building that the silence made possible. Count the growth that happened in the quiet that would have been impossible in the noise. Count these things as the blessings they actually are, because most people will spend their entire lives too busy being visible to ever accumulate them. Letting them wonder is not cruelty. It is not the petty satisfaction of making people curious about you as some kind of social tactic. It is simply the natural consequence of doing your real work in private. When you stop broadcasting your process, people wonder about the destination. When you stop explaining your thinking, people become curious about your conclusions. When you stop being predictable in your availability and your output and your direction, people pay attention in a way they never did when you were constant and visible and always within reach. And that attention, when it arrives in the context of something you actually built, is a completely different quality of attention than anything you could have generated by performing your journey in real time. It is the attention given to someone who went somewhere and came back changed. Someone who had the discipline to disappear and the capability to return with something worth returning with. That is winning. Not over anyone. Not as a competition with the people who underestimated you or the circumstances that tried to diminish you. Winning over the version of yourself that would have stayed visible and comfortable and available while the real work waited indefinitely. Disappear. Work. Return with something real. Let that be the only announcement you make. The Stoic discipline of unavailability is the foundation of everything worth building. Every philosopher the Stoics admired had one practice in common that they almost never spoke about directly because they considered it too obvious to require explanation. They guarded their time with a ferocity that the people around them sometimes mistook for coldness. Marcus Aurelius rose before dawn to write and think before the demands of empire began. Seneca famously refused social engagements that he considered beneath the quality of his attention. Epictetus taught in a school that required genuine commitment to attend, filtering his students not through intellectual credentials but through seriousness of purpose. None of them were cold people. All of them wrote with profound warmth about friendship and love and the bonds between human beings. But all of them understood, at the level of daily practice rather than abstract principle, that those bonds are deepened by quality of attention rather than quantity of availability. And quality of attention requires that you not scatter your attention across everything that wants it. Seneca wrote to Lucilius, "If you wish to be powerful, limit your circle. If you wish to be loved deeply, be selective about who receives your depth. If you wish to build something lasting, protect the hours required to build it from everything that would consume them without producing anything in return." Unavailability is a discipline. That word is important. Discipline is not the same as talent or personality or natural inclination. Discipline is a practice, something you build through repeated conscious choice across days and weeks and months until the choice becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a character trait, and the character trait becomes a way of moving through the world that no longer requires conscious effort to maintain. On the first day you decide not to respond immediately to every message, it will feel uncomfortable. On the 10th day, slightly less so. On the 30th day, you will have discovered something that changes your relationship to your own time permanently. You will have discovered that the consequences you feared, the damaged relationships, the disappointed people, the missed opportunities, were almost entirely fictional. That most of the urgency attached to most of the demands for your attention was urgency that existed in someone else's timeline and had no legitimate claim on yours. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man is rich in proportion to the number of things he can afford to let alone. Richness here is not about money. It is about the specific, rare, deeply stoic richness of someone who has enough internal resource, enough self-possession, enough clarity about what actually matters, that they can allow the merely important to wait while they attend to the essential. The essential is always personal. It is always the thing that only you can build with your specific combination of capacity and vision and accumulated experience. It is never the thing that the latest notification is demanding. It is never the thing that social pressure is insisting you attend to immediately. It is always the thing that has been waiting quietly in the background while the noise occupied the foreground. The discipline of unavailability is how you move the essential from background to foreground, how you create the conditions in which the most important work of your life can actually get done, rather than perpetually waiting for a window of availability that constant connectivity ensures will never arrive. And it compounds. This is the part that cannot be fully appreciated until you have lived it for long enough to see the accumulation. A month of protected mornings produces more than a month of scattered attention ever could. 3 months of genuine focus on the essential produces something visible. A year of the Stoic discipline of unavailability produces a person who is recognizably different from the person who began it. Not different in personality or character necessarily. Different in capability. Different in the weight of what they carry with them. Different in the settled, undemonstrative confidence of someone who has been building in private for long enough that the building has become real, and the reality of it no longer requires external confirmation to feel solid. Epictetus said, "Seek not the good in external things. Seek it in yourself." The good that unavailability produces is internal before it is external. It begins as focus and becomes skill. It begins as discipline and becomes character. It begins as the choice not to respond to one notification and becomes, across years of accumulated choices, a life that was actually built rather than merely lived through. The people who achieve things that most people only think about do not have more hours in their day. They have the same 24 that everyone else has. What they have that most people do not is a relationship with those hours that is fundamentally different. They treat their time as the finite, precious, irreplaceable resource that it actually is, rather than the endlessly available commodity that constant connectivity trains us to treat it as. They are, in the language of Stoicism, rich in the only currency that actually matters, rich in hours that were invested rather than spent, rich in the compounded return of sustained attention applied over sufficient time to the things that deserved it. You can build that richness, not tomorrow, not after the circumstances improve or the noise naturally reduces or the right moment arrives for you to begin protecting your time. Now, starting with 1 hour that you do not make available to anything except what you are building, then another, then a morning, then a day. The world will continue demanding. It will not stop because you have decided to build. It will press against the boundary of your unavailability every day and test whether the discipline is real or merely an intention dressed in the language of commitment. Let the discipline be real. Let the boundary hold. Let the world learn through your consistent and unannounced practice of it that your time is not a resource that can be accessed without having earned access, and build, quietly, consistently, without announcement, with the full force of the attention you have reclaimed from everything that was spending it without your permission. That building is the win, slow, invisible to most, compounding daily, and more complete than anything that constant visibility and endless availability could ever have produced. 5 principles. 1 direction. Stop being available to everyone and start being unavailable to the wrong ones. Go silent and let the silence show you who your real circle actually is. Use the quiet to build what the noise was preventing. Let them wonder while you work and return only when you have something real to return with. And make the Stoic discipline of unavailability the daily practice that everything else is built on. None of this is about being cold. None of it is about punishing people who took your availability for granted, or making yourself seem mysterious, or playing the kind of social games that the Stoics would have found beneath their dignity and yours. This is about something far simpler and far more important than any of that. This is about the recognition that your time, your attention, your energy, and your presence are finite and precious, and that how you allocate them is the most consequential series of decisions you will make across your entire life. Most people never make those decisions consciously. They let them be made by whoever is loudest, whoever is most persistent, whoever has the strongest claim on their guilt, or their social anxiety, or their fear of disappointing people. And so their time flows toward whoever demands it most aggressively, rather than toward whatever deserves it most genuinely. Stoicism is, at its core, the philosophy of conscious choice. The trained, disciplined, daily practice of deciding what you will give your limited life to and refusing to give it to anything that has not met that standard. Disappear silently, not forever, not as a rejection of the world, but long enough to remember what you are building and why it matters more than being endlessly reachable to people who never truly valued your reach. Win completely, not in a single moment, but in the slow, certain, compounding accumulation of days spent building something real with energy that has finally been reclaimed from everything that was consuming it without producing anything worth the cost. Seneca left us with this: Nusquam et qui ubique est. One who is everywhere is nowhere. Stop being everywhere, be somewhere, fully, completely, with everything you have. That somewhere is the building, that somewhere is the work, that somewhere is the quiet, powerful, deeply stoic place where everything worth having in your life is actually constructed. Go there, stay there, and come back only when you have something real in your hands. If this video found you at exactly the right moment, share it with someone who needs to reclaim what they have been giving away. And remember, disappear silently, win completely.